Kevin Ogutu, KTN News.
Moving on, across the world, there is increasing movement towards electric vehicles due to rising pollution and climate-damaging emissions from vehicles. In Kenya, a Swedish Kenya group, Opibus, has introduced electric motorcycles and buses with the aim of cleaning up polluting public transportation. This week's climate focus is on sustainable mobility in Africa and the impact in tackling the problem of pollution.
The streets of downtown Nairobi, Kenya's capital, may not be the place you want to take a deep breath. Air pollution is increasing, caused mainly by motorcycle taxis, also known as boda.
The number of newly registered motorcycles, commonly used as taxis or boda, was estimated in 2018 at 1.5 million and will likely grow 5 times million by 2030. Most are inefficient, poorly maintained, and heavily polluting.
According to the United Nations Environment Programme, or UN Environment, one motorcycle can have up to 300 times more hydrocarbon emissions and 10 to 50 times more particulate matter in comparison to an average petrol-powered car. And now, in this workshop, Swedish-Kenyan electric vehicle group Opibus is at work to cut the smog.
We're just excited to get as many people exposed to the new technology that we build as possible so that they know that it's an option. Because, you know, the Uber provides obviously a lot of boda riders. That's our target, that's our client target. They often don't know how beneficial our electric motorcycles can be in terms of money saving, in terms of safety, fuel savings, maintenance savings.
Josephat Mutiso is marking his 5th year in the motorcycle taxi business with a new electric motorcycle.
This is very efficient. It is even way easier to ride than the other one. You see, this one you don't have so many controls. You just have the throttle, no clutch. The only thing you are focusing on is just the front brake and the rear brake. That way it gives you even more control of the bike. And it is pretty light. It does not vibrate. So even clients like this one better.
The developing climate crisis is fueling concerns over greenhouse gas emissions, and the world is looking for solutions towards a net zero economy. Once seemingly far-fetched in the developing world, clean mobility is quickly becoming a priority here.
Targeting Africa and African countries is also part of that movement, and as Opibus, that's where we're targeting. We want all of us to move together, as you know, we all move towards a greener energy, a greener economy, and we can only do that if we all come together and empower and build capacity, you know, locally.
For Mutiso, there has never been a better time for business.
Everything I used to earn and save for the bike, for the maintenance of the bike, right now I'm saving it. So right now I'm making more.
In 2019 alone, air pollution was responsible for about 5,000 premature deaths in Kenya. This is according to the State of Global Air Report of 2020. And now, with up to a third of the country's population suffering from respiratory ailments, which usually are exacerbated by poor air quality, the introduction of electric mobility brings hope of both health and wealth for the nation. For Climate Focus, I am David Owino in Nairobi.
Hello and welcome to the expert interview segment of Climate Focus, the show that is the call to action. My name is Juma Majanga, and to discuss more on sustainable mobility in the continent of Africa, I'm joined by Jane Akumu, Project Officer at Sustainable Mobility at the United Nations Environment Programme. Karibu sana, Jane.
Asante.
Now, Jane, how much does public transportation contribute to pollution in the continent?
When you look at public transport, first, it's a small segment when you're looking at the whole vehicle fleet. Globally, public transport and the trucks, they form about a quarter of the global fleet. However, they are really big contributor to pollution. This is because most of the buses, the trucks, they use diesel, predominantly diesel, and the challenge in Africa is that the fuel type or fuel quality, and the vehicle standards are very, they're not as good. So most of the buses, since you asked about buses, they don't have emission control technology, the latest technologies to be able to reduce the harmful emissions. The small particulates that we breathe, they are one of the main causes of lung cancer, asthma, heart attacks and strokes. Almost actually all body parts are affected by that pollution, diesel pollution. So you can imagine that they are a big, significant contributor to pollution in Kenya and in Africa.
Now, there's a growing switch towards e-mobility around the world, and Africa is not left behind. Where does Africa stand in terms of that switch?
Africa is still in its infancy, but really there's a lot of interest to move to electric mobility. Globally as well, electric mobility is not a very old phenomenon. Actually, China started work on this much earlier. You'll find it's more advanced globally. When it comes to electric mobility, they incentivize the private sector to work on, the shift to electric mobility. So like the motorcycles, the two-wheelers, China is leading. The three-wheelers, now India is taking, has taken the lead in the electric mobility. In the buses, again, China is leading, but Europe is also, playing a key role. So what we see globally is that a lot of countries have incentivized more recently the switch to electric mobility. For example, Norway now, which is leading outside China, about 30% of their fleet is electric. But if you look at last year, almost 80% of the new fleet was actually electric. And there are countries, a handful of countries that have set targets to now shift 100% to electric mobility. Any new fleet will be electric. Norway, by 2025, you will not be able to buy a petrol or diesel vehicle in Norway. In Netherlands, it's 2035. In a lot of countries, it's 2035, 2040, 2050. But what is interesting, in Africa, we have Cape Verde, which has set 2035. So by 2035, they will no longer be buying petrol and diesel vehicles. So that's a first, in Africa. But what we are seeing, for example, in Kenya, there are a lot of companies that are already bringing in electric vehicles. For example, we have Nopia, which is a fully electric taxi fleet company. We have the three-wheeler, a lot of companies that are now doing three-wheeler electric. So what I would say is that it's still at its infancy in Africa, but a lot of hope and a lot of, activity already going towards electric mobility, shifting towards electric mobility.
Now, sustainable mobility obviously goes beyond just having electric vehicles on the road. Just take us through the building blocks that create sustainable mobility.
City readiness. Is a city ready for electric mobility? And how do you make a city ready? A political will. So you'll find, especially like for buses, electric buses are still expensive. But you will recover your costs later, in terms of the fuel use, engine changes, maintenance, operational costs, you'll recover it later. But the upfront costs are quite high. So definitely you need a bit of incentive, government incentive, taxation and such. So political will, very, very key in the shift to electric mobility. And that's why you're seeing a lot of the countries that have been able to move towards electric mobility. The top leadership, the ministers, they are all geared towards this. Then the second thing I would say would be a strategy. Does the country or the city have a strategy? An e-mobility strategy. And this can be part of a wider city strategy that that this is where we want the city to go, towards zero pollution, towards cleaning up, towards, so you need a strategy that now looks at all the other things, how do you link people walking, people cycling, in a lot of the cities even to encourage cycling. they are moving to e-bikes, e-bicycles. So it's a whole strategy for the city. Then the other thing I would say that is actually quite key would be government policy and standards. Just to give you an example, if you look at Rwanda, it's actually leading in the East Africa on incentives. The government has zero-rated electric cars in terms of VAT, in terms of excess duty, in terms of import duty. So when you're buying an electric car, you don't pay that. They're actually giving free land if you're putting in a charging infrastructure. So you'll get the land for free. They are also giving industrial tariff for people who will be running charging facilities. So you see government trying to shape electric mobility is quite important. And I know for some of the countries in Europe, buildings that are coming up, you also need to have a facility for charging, either in the, in the building or outside the building. So those are things I think that would be able to encourage e-mobility in general, but also sustainable mobility.
Now, we'll end this with your final thoughts. You're an expert in this and working in this, looking at it holistically. What would be your final message?
When you're talking about sustainable mobility, we're not yet there. We are faced with a lot of challenges, when it comes to, for example, pedestrian and people cycling. You've seen there are no facilities, good facilities for people to walk, for people to cycle. Accidents are on the increase because of lack of that. When it comes to vehicles, as I mentioned, many countries lack standards. So we are importing very old technology vehicles. The fuel, yes, we are working on the fuels, but it's still not yet there. The fuels are not as clean as they should be. So transport is one of, especially the localized pollution is on the increase in a lot of the cities. But I see this as opportunity because Africa is still not developed. If you look at vehicles per 1,000 people, for some of the countries, I think Ethiopia is seven vehicles per 1,000 people. If you look at Kenya, it's 30-something, 35 vehicles per 1,000 people. So very, very low. Europe, it's like 550 vehicles per 1,000 people. In some of the states in the US, it's 800 and something, almost 900 vehicles per 1,000 people. Almost 1-to-1. So we're still underdeveloped. Still, we see a doubling of vehicles every 10 or so years in most of Africa. So it is an opportunity because the vehicles are not yet here. You see now motorization is still low. Cities are being, are being developed now. So an opportunity for us to take the sustainable mobility pathway. So a lot of opportunities, and I'm optimistic that if we put our heads together, we'll be able to meet the goal of sustainable mobility.
If we put our heads together, we'll be able to attain sustainable mobility.
Well, it's all about the climate right there on Climate Focus. We'll definitely keep you updated. But that brings us to the end of today's edition of Africa Speaks. Thanks for watching. Enjoy the rest of your viewing. I'm Jesse Walters.